宗薩欽哲仁波切was 19 years old when my family and I first met him in 1980, whilst we were attending the 3-month Landre Lobshe teachings given by His Holiness Sakutrism in Peru. He glided regally into the monastery on the first day of the teachings. I was mesmerized, needless to say, and that was it for me. Shortly after this meeting, I requested Rinpoche to be my teacher and also invited him to come to Australia, which Rinpoche said he would when he learnt better English.
Do you want me to say another way of generating compassion? Is that okay?
More, please.
Isn't it clear? So, is there any question more? I think we can meet next Saturday again. Tibetan, they call it Wang. The Wang is initiation or empowerment. It's to bless your body, speech and mind. They say that you are primordially, you have the Tathagata Garbha primordially. And in order to recognize this, or in order to ripe this, you have to have the initiation according to Vajrayana. And initiation tradition is special method of Vajrayana. Tibetan Dharma tradition is very strong. Whenever they do special religious ceremony or they give initiation, they dress nice, and Lama, the one who gives the initiation, they wear hats of different sects. So maybe you can see how I do.
They didn't know what to make of him because they thought they were supposed to take lamas very serious. He was very young, and a few people sort of said, "Go on, is he grown up yet?"
Oh my God.
Rata Rinpoche came from Dharamsala in 1980. He blessed the land and gave the name Vajradhara Gompa. He said he wouldn't be the head of the Gompa, that there was a young Lama coming, and we'd know him by his deep compassion.
What we have here, which is extraordinary about, you could say, Siddhartha's intent, and there are of course other Dharma groups like that, is we have a living teacher. And it's important to understand Buddhism is not just an academic exercise, it's not just a theory, because we have plenty of, let's say, theories for personal growth, even the practice of mindfulness and so forth, which very often is, you could say, sanitized to fit our particular cultural or personal agendas. And what is extraordinary when we have a teacher is that the path, and rather the result of the path, is no longer just hypothetical or theoretical. We actually see the living embodiment of enlightenment.
In 1984, Rinpoche was giving teachings to Diane Bowen in Kathmandu when she received news that her father was seriously ill. As she didn't want to give up the teachings, she invited Rinpoche to travel with her to Australia, and he accepted. So at the beginning of June 1984, Rinpoche arrived in Australia unannounced.
Doorbell rings, I go to the front door, open my own front door, and there's Rinpoche on the doorstep, and that's how I met him. I was very struck. I was not a Buddhist. I hadn't considered Buddhism. I hadn't thought about it. Didn't know any monks or lamas. I was going to say smitten, but I don't mean falling in love. And yet in a way it was like that. I was just totally, took my breath away.
We had been in contact with Rinpoche via mail, snail mail. When Rinpoche called, the first thing we said was we were totally surprised. We'd never received a phone call from him, although we'd had letters. Where are you? Thinking he'd say Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim. Rinpoche said, I'm in Avoca Beach, which was about an hour from where we were living at the time. It was unbelievable. Dropped off the end of the phone, screamed, jumped in the car, drove down immediately.
In July 1984, I received a phone call from my friend Phil Jackson in Sydney, telling me there's a young Lama in town who wants to come and see what you are doing, building a gompa in the bush near Kyogle. Khyentse Rinpoche wanted to see the gompa, and we walked up the mountain, Rinpoche running on ahead, wearing Joe's gumboots, his robes tucked up, and shouting, "This is just like Bhutan."
I walked in and introduced myself to Rinpoche, and delightfully ready to ask questions, and Rinpoche just said, no questions, which was the first moment of throwing me into, what? I sort of, okay, I'm ready to ask questions, no questions, and Rinpoche said, actually, I would like to ask you a question. And I said, yes. He said, what does enlightenment mean to you?
I met Rinpoche in September 1986 in Sydney. It was just out of the blue. Some friend of mine, hardly a good acquaintance, rang and said some Tibetan Rinpoche was in town and knew of my interest in such things. So I went along the next night, and that was it really.
This is the airport up on the north coast, Joe and Kathy welcoming Rinpoche. This is the first time after the completion of the gompa. Rinpoche said, I will go up on my own. And once he'd entered, we were allowed to come up. This is the first time Rinpoche actually walks through the door of the completed gompa. Walking in, his very first prostrations, and the first time he looked around and saw the gompa.
Over the next 25 years, the gompa became a pivotal part of Rinpoche, introducing the Buddha Dharma in Australia and the world, hosting so many teachings from the 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism.
And the very first time he got on the throne. Oh, it brings it all back so vividly. We were all so excited. I remember the fire ceremony. It was part of the blessing of the site and the gompa itself.
I think at the very first time at Sussex Street, it was announced that there were going to be 2 retreats, and one up at Kyogle. And I asked whether I could go. I actually asked Rinpoche, which was surprising. I could hardly talk to the man for a long time. I got permission to come to Kyogle, which was an experience in itself, going to the gompa in those days. The kitchen was inside the temple. It was the Lama house. There was the structure of the gompa, and it was a wonderful little retreat. Rinpoche taught mainly about emptiness.
Then he mentioned a word called emptiness, and that was our first kind of Rinpoche's teaching that hit, I guess, a little bit of doubt on the solidness of how we perceive things and how fixated we are about our particular truth.
Devati deve devendra surendro danavadipa amarendra suraguru प्रमथः प्रमथेश्वरः सर्वसंभोगकायरट् निर्माणकायाग्र बुद्धनिर्माणवंशधृक् दशदिग्विश्वनिर्माणो यथावज् जगदार्थकृत् देवति देवे देवेन्द्रः सुरेन्द्रो दानवादिपः अमरेन्द्रः सुरगुरु प्रमथः प्रमथेश्वरः